Okay, now you see that I've already started this, and it's actually 80 pegs. Basically, you want to take a standard size hat loom, and you can change the size of this however you want. 80 pegs is about an adult size head. It's a smaller adult. And you can do this 88, you can do this 72, you can make it smaller, you can make it bigger. It's got a repeat to it. It's got a 16 row repeat, and I'm going to show you how to do that, and we're just going to work our way through and making this hood. Okay, and keep in mind this is showing up on the wrong side. Alright, so this is what it looks like above. I've done a complete set already. Alright, and I'm going to show you how to do this. Okay, it doesn't matter which cast on you do. I did a chain cast on, so I did a chain cast on, and then I knitted my way back. So no matter what loom you do, chain cast on, knit your first row. Okay, you can do other cast on methods, but you want to be able to start on this side. Now you can try reversing this, and if you are typically right-handed, you can reverse this process. Okay, so here's how this goes. I'm going to knit this first peg. Then I'm going to E-wrap 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. I am not touching any of these stitches down here. None. All right. We're just going to work these 6 stitches we just cast on. Now you can cast them on any way you want. All right. But I just prefer a regular E-wrap cast on. First things first, you're going to knit your first row. Then you're going to purl your second row. You're going to do this a total of 7 rows. All right. So you're going to purl this row, and you don't touch your original stitches there. And the reason being is if you do, you connect your scale, petal, whatever you want to call it, to a part of the row that you don't want, and it won't lay right. Okay. This is an entirely separate thing. So you purl those 6 stitches, and then you're going to knit your way over. And you're going to purl your 4th row. Okay, and then you're going to knit your 5th row. Now this is how you do a petal every time, right? When we start getting into some of the other areas, I will probably change up how I am doing things. Okay, so this is row 6. So remember how to do this petal, because I'm not going to show it every time. All right, I'll show you how to start it. And then I'll show you how to stagger it for the next batch. Okay, so that's row 6. And this is row 7. And here is where we finish our scale. Okay, so this is a crocodile stitch. This is the first pattern I've managed to finally sit down and start with using the new crocodile stitch. All right, now you're going to wrap the yarn around your first peg, toss the bottom loop over. Then you're going to take your Yorking yarn and you're going to pull through a chunk. All right. And when you pull it through the same direction. I'm going to pull it through purlwise. All right, you're just going to pull the whole thing through. Still not touching those original stitches. All right, now you're going to grab this loop. Don't let go of it. Now you're going to take these stitches off, okay? Then you're going to pull to tighten. And you can pull your petal or scale out. And see, you have just created a scale or petal. This is based off of Christy Davis's trim, except instead of going sideways with it, I've made it work where you can work it into a garment. So it was brilliant shoot off from hers. Okay. Now that I've completed that, in order to start the next one, I knit 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. When you knit 3, then you can E-wrap cast on 6. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. You go your back and forth, back and forth. All right. When you're ready to do your 7, you will actually wrap this stitch here. You do just like you did over here. All right. So what should happen is there should be a 2-peg, a 2-stitch that's a 2-stitch that's in between your petals. All right, so keep that in mind. It's a 2-stitch that's in between your petals. But you're going to repeat exactly what we just did over here, right here. And this is your wrap and turn and toss over and then go forth there, and then you knit 3. So you repeat what we just did over and over, all right? And that gives you how to do this petaling, okay? But this is just your first row of petaling. After you complete the row, go as far as you can. Yes, you will do a bit of overlapping here. You just make sure you don't include these stitches. So when you get over here, you're going to have to overlap on this if you're going to send it right back. But do it as far as you can. And then when we come back, we should be ready to start our rows in between. As you can see, there are rows in between to spread it out so that it isn't stacked right on top of each other and it has a nice spread out feel. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, and in fact work as far as you can, and when you get here, if you get confused, I'll show you the last petal so that you know what you're doing. Okay, so pause the video, work the row around, repeating what we just did, and then I'll show you the last petal over here in case you get confused. And then the next 7 rows are really easy. They're just knit. This is curling a little bit. If you don't want it to curl, you can purl every other row. Okay. But this is going to be a hood, and I'm going to be blocking this, and so that shouldn't really change it up much when I go to actually mess with it, because what I'm going to be doing is sewing this. I'm going to fold this in half and I'm going to sew it. So it really doesn't matter if it's curling because I'm going to sew it straight. When we get to the face, I'm going to be changing up on that too. So don't worry about if it's curling. We're going to be fixing that when we go in to actually sew everything up. Okay. So pause the video, get yourself all the way over to here. I'll show you how to do the last petal over here, and then we can move on to the next 7 stitches. Okay, so As you can see, I have completed a third round of the crocodile stitch. Okay. And I have completed basically a petal. And here is your starting point, and here's your ending point. And you can see that I went over by 3. Right? So I'm to the point where I wrap around my previous peg that doesn't have a stitch on it. I toss the bottom loop over, and then I pull my loop through. Okay. And I go and do that. Now, where you know you need to stop and where you know you need to keep going. Okay. And I'll explain this with the second one, because the second row is a little trickier. All right. This one's not so difficult. All right. So I pull that tight and put that on and tighten it. And then I like to pull on it so that it's loosened up. All right. So here is the thing. Now you toss that loop over. You only have 2 stitches left. Alright, so you don't have 4. So you don't have enough to do another petal. So all you do is you just knit your way to the end. Alright? Now, what comes next is you're just going to knit back and forth for 7 rows. Okay? And how I calculate this, let's say you want smaller little petals. If you do 5 rows in your petals, so if you do 5 rows, you'll do 5 rows in between. If you do 7 like I did, you'll do 7 rows in between. Alright? And that keeps it spread out enough, it's not overlapping heavily, and you get the look you're after. Now, I am going to provide a formula for this pattern so that you can change gauge, you can change looms. You can start by making it bigger with less scales to do. Okay. My suggestion is you find your hat size that you typically use. Okay. 80 is typical for adult, but you can fit it on a child. And then you want to take your actual head circumference, divide it by 3, and then you want to figure out your rows per inch. Okay, and so this pattern I calculated was 7 rows per inch when I went in and did it. And so when you consider that one set of petals with 7 rows is an inch. So we've completed basically almost 3 inches. And when you divide it by 3 and you're doing an adult head, and maybe 7 inches you're supposed to do, so you have 7 rows of scales, or you'll have 6 rows of scales. So what I'm probably going to do is do 6 rows of scales and then do the facial front where it's going to come down in the front where it's going to sit better on the head. Okay, so when I'm decreasing on that section, the way I'm doing it, I'm not going to be working with as many stitches. So if you don't have the flexi loom and you don't want the flexi loom, you can still do this pattern and you can do it on a regular loom. You'll just be shuffling some stitches around, but it's not a real big deal because you aren't going to be working with that many stitches to shuffle around to do the accent to the front. Alright, so go ahead and do your 7 rows, and then when we come back, I'll show you how to stagger the rows so that they start looking like that, okay? And that way you know what the stagger row looks like. And you just keep repeating these 16 rows over and over again, you may not complete an even 16. You may only complete like one extra, but it's not going to be that difficult to keep up with. Okay, I promise. So if you are interested in this pattern, I will include a formula that will make it easy for you to figure out what amount of stitches you need, how many rows you need to do, with a real basic formula. This is not a beginner's pattern. It's an advanced pattern, and so you should be able to plug and fill in the formula to get the size adjustment that you want. Okay, so pause the video, get your 7 rows done, and I'll show you how to stagger. Okay, here's what we've got. You can see the rows in between them. Okay, now it's time to show you how to stagger this. It's not difficult. Now, if you remember the first time we did it, we knitted that one and then we started immediately. So consider this like the knit 3. So here's knit 1, 2, 3. Then you start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and what this does is it staggers it. Okay, so that it sits in between the previous row's scales. All right. So then you work your petal like normal. And then what you should have is right here, when the last one was right here. And then you just keep following the pattern of knit 3, and then start your petal again, knit 3, and start your petal again. And you do it all the way around. And what you're going to find is when you get over here, so you work all the way around, and when you get over here, you're actually going to be working where you knit your 3, and you're actually going to be working over here. These are going to be your last 2, and a petal is going to be there. Okay, and I'll show that so that it makes sense. Then at that point, you're just going to do a whole bunch of repeating of these 2 scale rows for the length that you need, and it's probably only going to be either 6 or 7 times, depending on what you're doing there. Okay, so I will show this scale so that you get an idea of what you're doing, and then I'm going to leave you to do another scale row, and then I'll show the very last one so that it makes sense. Okay, wrap it around. Toss the bottom lip over, and then pull through. Get the bottom lip over, and then knit 3. Then start again. And as you can see, that one sits in between those, and that one sits in between those. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, do your scale row all the way around, And then when you get to this last one, I'll show you how that works. Okay, I've now basically completed 4 rows of the scale stitch. Okay, now what you want to see, here's my starting point, and I have just done my 7 rows, and you'll see that I worked it from the very end peg and crossed over almost 6 stitches. See, on my last scale. I finished my 7 rows, but you can see 5 of the stitches overlapped this side. Okay, here's what you want to do. You're going to wrap around, toss the loop over. So yes, you're going to go to the very end. If you don't want to, I'm sure you cannot, but this end is going to be a one that's around the shoulders. Okay. So I've done 4 sections. I've showed you 2 scale rows, and after this scale row you're going to do 7 rows. Now if you ever want to do this stitch pattern and you don't want the edges to curl, so what I'm probably going to do, because this edge is going to be sewn together but the front edge is not, on the last section of knits, you're fixing to do 7 rows of knit. On the last section, just before you do your scale stitch, you want to do a garter stitch, and that should keep the face from curling. Okay, so that's a knit 1 row, purl 1 row on the last section. All right. Oops. So at this point, you'll want to knit back and forth for 7 rows, and that completes your 16 row set. Then you go back to the first scale set. Now, depending on who you're making this for, I'm going to go the full 7 scale rows, but you can go 6. It depends on who you're making it for. Mostly you're trying to get the inches, figure out the inches that you need to wrap around the back of the head. Okay. So for instance, this is your seam. You're going to sew it right down the middle. You need to make sure that this is going to meet the front of the face. That's what you need to make sure. So like I have 3 more scale rows to do, and you can do 7, you can do 6 if you want it to not hang over the face. What I'm going to do is I want it to try to fit fairly well, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind off to a certain extent, and then I'm going to be decreasing through here on the center side, and what that's going to do is going to cinch it down and start where it's going to sit flat towards the face, and it's not going to be able to fall back. So it'll add an extra element to this hood as well. So go ahead at this point, repeat your 16 row repeat, and when we come back we should be able to start working the decrease. Okay, and if you don't like it curling, on your 7 row repeat, on your 7 rows of just knit, you can do a garter stitch, seed stitch, anything that keeps it from curling. So I would suggest a garter stitch where maybe every 2nd row you purl, every 3rd row you purl. You're just trying to keep it from curling. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and get your scale rows done so that we're ready to do their bind off section and start on the face. Okay, I completed a 7th row of crocodile stitch. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I've completed 7 rows. Alright. And what I'm ready to do now is to go in and do the front. Okay. And so what I want to do is do 6 rows of a seed stitch. So you're going to start off with a knit purl all the way around. Okay. And what this is going to do is going to give you a nice edge at the front of the face. So knit purl all the way around. Okay, pause video and get that much done. Okay, you should have finished with a purl, and at this point you are going to do a knit and purl all the way back around. Okay, this is a seed stitch. You're doing the opposite of what you just previously did on the previous peg. So if you ended with a purl, you're starting with a knit and you're creating a seed stitch. Okay, and you're going to do this for a total of 6 rows. Alright. So go ahead and pause the video and complete your seed stitch. When we come back, we'll be ready to start binding off and doing the front of the top area. Okay, I have done my 6 rows of seed stitch, and what I'm ready to do is start binding off a certain amount of stitches. Okay, so if you're making this in another size, you're going to divide it by 3, and whatever that number is what you're going to be binding off on the end. With me, this is going to be 26 stitches. So what you're going to do is you're going to bind off 26 stitches. All right. You're not going to be doing it super tight or anything. So 26 stitches, okay, and you'll count them. So 26, so bind off 26 going this direction, okay, and then progress on, okay, because what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to keep up with where you're going to be and seed stitch to here. All right, so bind off 26, and then I'll show you how to finish up the row. Okay, so I have binded off 26 stitches, and because of how this works, it's a two peg repeat. You're going to continue the seed stitch. This should have been the last one that you kind of moved over and tossed over. It's going to be a knit right here, and then you're going to purl it. Okay. So then you're going to knit purl to the end. Okay. Because you've already done this one, it comes across as a knit, but keep in mind you're doing even, so you know you're going to start with a knit. But if you don't know what you're starting with, this is a pearl, and it looks a lot like a knit on the inside. I'll see if I can get this thing to cooperate. Okay. If you see that, it looks kind of like a knit. That's a knit, and that's a purple. So if you see a stitch going up under the wrap, that is a pearl. Okay. So you know you're going to need to use a knit. So if you don't know, that's how you go about it. Okay. Alright, so pause the video. Knit purl your way to the end. Okay? Okay, so what you want to do now is you want to bind off 26 on this side. So, once you bind off 26 on this side, I'll show you what you need to do with what stitches you have left. You're most likely going to seed stitch to the end, and then we're going to start doing decreasing. And what this will do is it will help it stay in place rather than falling off when wearing it. Okay. So go ahead and pause the video and bind off your 26 stitches, and then we'll come back and continue on to the next section of the hood. Okay, I have finished binding off my 26, and if you want to quit dealing with all these extra tags, just click them off, put them to the side, and this is what you should have left. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28. That sounds right. Okay, so in order to finish, this should be your knit, and this should be your, pull that down. Okay, so your first stitch should be your knit, and your second stitch should be a purl. So what you want to do is knit purl your way to the end. Okay. Then I believe you're going to get down to a decrease by every other stitch. Okay. So knit purl your way to the end, and then I'll show you what the next step is. Okay, so this is basically what it should look like so far. Okay, so what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to decrease by every other stitch. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to move that over. Try not to lose the stitch. You're going to move that one over, and you're going to knit the two together. Of course it wants to give me a hard time right when I'm wanting to finish this up. Alright. You want to knit the two together. Gonna move that over. Knit the two together. Move that stitch over. Tighten. Okay. Then you're gonna move that over. Knit the two together. Move that over. Knit the two together. Move this stitch over. Basically, we're doing an internal decrease. So if you're working with a round loom, you just do an internal decrease. This is how you do an internal decrease on a flexi loom. It's a little easier. So move over, knit the two together. Move over, knit the two together. Move that one over and take it. And then snug up those two stitches. Real easy. So then you're going to move that one over, knit the two together, move that one over, knit the two together. So I'm performing an internal decrease on a round loom. If you're doing this, you do not have to have a flexi loom. We're not going to be doing this too many times. This is just going to get the shape where it'll start to hug the front of the face. So decrease, knit the two together, decrease, knit the two together, move it over, take out that. And you're going to be doing this all the way across, and then you'll be starting your seed stitch again. Then you'll be decreasing by every other row. So keep in mind, if you have a flexi loom and you're doing my stuffed animals, you can do your internal decrease just like that. Super easy. Okay, this is what you should have so far. Alright, now what you're going to do is you're going to do a knit, purl, all the way across. Okay. And you're going to move that in one. You've finished with a purl. And you move the one over here over two. Okay. So you finished with a pearl. You would have started with a knit, so this is going to be a pearl, 2 together. And knit. Pearl. And knit. Pearl. Knit. All the way over. Okay, then you knit the 2 together. For some reason it just didn't feel like it was working out right. Okay. Then you knitted, so you need to start with a purl because you're continuing that seed stitch. So you'll purl and knit your way to the end. Then you're going to decrease again. And then you'll just be repeating this following your seed stitch to the end because it starts to repeat what you start with after you do this twice. Okay, so you finish with a knit. So you're going to decrease over, and you're going to decrease over, and you're going to be starting with a knit, and then do a knit purl all the way to the end. Okay, you finish with a purl, you're going to start off with a knit. Knit purl your way to the other side, then you're going to decrease again. You're going to be starting with a purl. 2 together. Alright. And you're going to continue this process until you don't have any more stitches. Okay. Then you're going to take and move this stitch over. And then start with a purl 2 together. And knit. Just like we did on the previous one. Okay. So, purl the 2 together. And knit. So just like you did on the previous one, keeping up with your knit purls when you're decreasing, you're going to be following the last 4 rows on how I did this, okay? Until you're down to no more stitches you can do this with. And then you knit the 2 together, and you're going to start with a purl. move those in ones over. This time you're going to knit the two together. And purl. And then purl the two together. Knit and purl. Right over. And repeat again, decrease, and start with a purl for the next 2 rows. And then decrease and then start with a knit for the next 2 rows. Okay. Pause the video, complete your decreasing until you have no more. And we should be ready to finish this up. Okay, we're down to our last 2 stitches. And it's up to you if you want to just bind off those last 2, you can. Or you can decrease the last 2. Doesn't much matter. Okay. And just make sure you get yourself enough tail to weave in. Okay. Okay. And you want to stretch your seed stitch out. Okay. So this is what you should have. And then you're going to fold it in half. Now, if you're doing something like me, and you don't have your repeat color of yellow anywhere, and you need to be able to sew up the back half to create the hood effect, what you'll want to do is get a crochet hook. Okay, fold it in half and find your edges. You'll have your tail, and you want to start at the opposite ends because the tail is going to help you close it off. Okay. Now, what you want to do is you want to take the inside and pull it through. Okay. So you want to take the inside of the chain and pull it through. Inside of the chain and pull it through, and you want to keep up with what you're doing next. Okay. Try to make sure you stay to your very edge and you don't get lost in there either. So you find the inner side of the chain. Okay. You'll see that there are 2 sides to the chain. You have the outer side and the inner side. And what you're doing is sticking it through and pulling it through. And you're going to find the same thing on the opposite side. So this is the outer side and the inner side on the opposite side. And what this is doing is it's closing off the back. If you don't have the yarn color that you need to sew it up, this is the alternative. Okay. Of how to do that. And you just keep doing this until you have reached the end. Okay. So go ahead, and you see that's what you're doing. You're seeing you're closing it up all nice and neat. Just go ahead and pause the video and either sew up, which you can do the other way, Or you can do what I'm doing and connecting it so that you don't have a weird color showing up in the back. Alright, so pause the video and get this much done. And then at this point, you weave in your ends and you're done. So I'll show you how to finish this up once you get to the end. But once this is done, you're almost to the finishing point. Okay, I have reached the end, and as you can see, I closed up the back. When you reach the end, you're going to grab your tail, you're going to pull it through, and then you're going to pull it through twice. And you're going to just tighten it. Okay? Okay. And then when you go to put it on, those should push against each other. So at this point, what you want to do is weave in your ends, and then my suggestion is to go in and block it. What I'll probably do is press it a little bit with a warm iron to get it to have a nice flow to it. But that is what it should look like. That's what the inside looks like. And that is what the outside looks like. Alright? And that is how you make a dragon hood.